When Niembeki, a 26-year-old nurse from Lusaka, came home after a long night shift, she expected to find her parents having breakfast or watching TV. But the house was silent. Too silent. The front gate was wide open. Plates of half-eaten food sat on the dining table, steam long gone cold. Her father's phone was still charging in the corner, her mother's handbag lay on the couch, untouched. But her parents, Kato and Lillian, were nowhere to be found. Nia called out for them, her voice echoing down the hallway. No answer. She checked every room, the backyard, even the garage. Everything was in its place, except her parents. The neighbors told her they saw the couple leaving early in the morning with suitcases, smiling, as if going on a trip. But when Nia checked the security footage from the gate camera, no one had left. Not once did the gate open after she left for work. As the sun went down, the house started to feel strange, colder than before, as if the air itself was holding its breath. The lights flickered, and for a second, she thought she heard footsteps upstairs. Her heart pounded. She whispered her parents' names again, hoping this was some kind of joke. But only silence answered. Then, from the dark hallway, Nia felt it, that heavy, crawling sense that she wasn't alone. Someone, or something, was watching her from inside her own home. For the next 3 days, Nia refused to leave the house. She told herself she just needed answers, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that her parents were still there, somewhere close, maybe even inside the house. Every morning, she searched through drawers, closets, and boxes, hoping to find a note, a clue, anything that could explain what had happened. But the more she searched, the stranger things became. The lights flickered at random, sometimes flashing like someone was playing with the switch. Her mother's favorite perfume, the sweet, soft scent of jasmine, filled the hallway at odd hours, even though the bottle was still sealed on her dresser. At night, the house felt alive. The air seemed to move on its own, as if the walls were breathing slowly around her. Sometimes, when Nia turned a corner, she could swear she heard footsteps following her, slow, careful, almost human. But every time she spun around, the hall was empty. She started sleeping with the lights on, clutching her phone like a weapon. The house creaked and whispered in the dark, making her jump at every sound. On the third night, something changed. Around midnight, Nia sat on the couch, scrolling through old family photos, trying not to cry. That's when she heard it, a faint sound, like someone talking far away. She turned down the TV and listened. The sound was coming from the air vent near the ceiling. She climbed on a chair and pressed her ear against it. A soft voice whispered, "Don't trust the walls." Nia froze. Her blood ran cold. The voice was clear, and it wasn't her imagination. She stumbled back, heart racing, eyes wide. For a moment, she thought maybe it was a prank or a trick from outside, but the voice came again, louder this time. She recognized it instantly. It was her mother's voice. "Mom." Nia whispered, stepping closer. "Is that you?" No answer. Just a faint sound, like crying. She grabbed her phone, switched to record, and aimed it toward the vent. The whisper turned into a desperate voice, shaking, pleading. "Nia, don't leave me, please." Her hands trembled so badly she almost dropped the phone. The sound was filled with pain and fear. She pressed her ear closer, trying to understand. "Where are you?" she whispered. "Tell me where you are." But the voice faded, replaced by a low hum, like the walls themselves were sighing. Then silence. Nia stood frozen in the middle of the living room, her heart pounding so loud it drowned out the quiet. The air felt heavy and cold. She looked around at the walls, the same walls she'd grown up with, walls covered in family photos and warm memories, and for the first time in her life, they didn't feel like home. They felt like they were hiding something. Something alive. Something waiting. Nia couldn't sleep after hearing her mother's voice through the vent. The sound kept playing in her head, the fear, the pleading. Every creak of the floor made her jump. By the next morning, she made up her mind. She was done being scared. If her parents were still in that house, she was going to find them. She walked through every room again, checking vents, walls, and floors, listening for even the smallest noise. The house groaned softly, as if it didn't want her to know its secrets. While searching the hallway near her parents' bedroom, Nia noticed something strange. There was a large old wardrobe pressed tightly against the wall. It had always been there, filled with old clothes and blankets, but today it looked off. The dust around its legs was uneven, and faint scrape marks trailed across the floor, like it had been moved recently. Nia's heart started to race. She pushed the wardrobe aside with all her strength, her hands shaking. Behind it, hidden under peeling wallpaper, was a small wooden door, sealed shut with rusty nails. She stared at it in shock. No one had ever mentioned a room behind that wall. She ran her fingers over the edges. The wood was cold and slightly damp. Something about it felt wrong. Taking a crowbar from the garage, she pried the nails loose one by one, each pull echoing through the house. The final nail snapped free, and the door creaked open. A wave of cold air rushed out, thick with the smell of dust and metal. Nia aimed her flashlight inside. It was a narrow storage space, maybe 2 meters wide, filled with old boxes and broken furniture. But then she froze. On the dusty floor were fresh footprints, small, bare ones, leading deeper into the darkness. She felt her throat tighten. Someone had been there recently. Suddenly, the air vent above her let out a faint sound. A whisper. So soft she almost missed it. "They can hear you." Nia's whole body went rigid. Her flashlight trembled in her hand. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice barely steady. The whisper came again, even quieter this time, as if whoever it was didn't want to be caught speaking. "They can hear you, don't let them know." Her knees went weak. She stumbled back, bumping into the wardrobe. Her mind raced. This wasn't a ghost. This wasn't her imagination. Someone was speaking from inside the walls, someone alive. Nia pressed her ear to the wall beside the door, holding her breath. Faintly, she could hear it, a soft, uneven breathing, like someone trying not to cry. It was coming from behind the wall, not inside the room. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. "Mom?" she whispered. No response, just a shuffle, then silence. Nia realized the truth in one terrifying instant. The voice wasn't haunting the house. It was trapped within it. And whatever built those walls never meant for anyone to be found again. Nia couldn't stop thinking about the voice behind the wall. Every sound in the house made her flinch, every shadow looked alive. She needed help, so she called Tund, her childhood friend. He was the only person who would believe her. When he arrived, she looked pale and restless, her eyes red from sleepless nights. She told him everything, the whispers, the hidden door, the footprints. At first, he thought maybe she was imagining things, but when he stepped inside the cold, silent house, he felt it too, that strange heaviness in the air, like the walls were listening. Together, they decided to dig deeper. Tund worked in real estate, so he had access to public building records. They spent hours going through files and dusty papers until they found the original blueprints of the house. But something didn't add up. The layout of the house they saw on paper didn't match the one Nia lived in. There were extra spaces drawn between rooms, narrow corridors that didn't appear in real life. And one thing stood out immediately, a sealed crawl space directly beneath the living room. As they looked further, they found something even more unsettling. A renovation permit had been filed years ago under her father's name, but the signature wasn't his. It belonged to someone named Baiko, her father's old business partner. Nia remembered that name. Baiko had gone missing years ago after being accused of stealing money from investors, including her father. Everyone assumed he'd fled the country. But now, It looked like he hadn't gone anywhere. He'd been right here. Tund frowned at the documents. Why would he renovate the house? And why would your parents never mention it, he asked. Nia didn't have an answer. All she knew was that something terrible was buried in that house. That night, they lifted the rug in the living room and found a square outline in the wooden floor, a hatch, hidden beneath layers of old paint. The metal handle was rusted, but still movable. When Tund pulled it open, a wave of cold, damp air hit them. A narrow ladder led down into darkness. The beam of their flashlight revealed dirt walls and metal pipes, and faint marks on the ground, like something had been dragged through there. Nia's stomach turned. Someone built this, she whispered. On purpose. They followed the passage slowly, their footsteps echoing in the tight space. The walls were covered with insulation and strange wires, and every few feet, they saw small vents leading upward, the same vents where Nia had heard her mother's voice. When they reached the end of the crawl space, Tund pointed to a heavy wooden door set deep into the wall. He shone his light across it, revealing scratch marks all around the handle. Someone had tried to get out. Nia's breath caught. My parents were never missing, she said softly. They were trapped. Right here. Inside our own house. Nia couldn't rest after finding the hidden passage. Every part of her body told her that her parents were still somewhere inside that house. She needed proof, something real, something she could hold on to. That night, she set up a small recording device in the living room, right above the vent where she'd first heard her mother's voice. She left another one near the hidden door behind the wardrobe. Then she sat in her car outside, unable to sleep, staring at the dark house and praying for a sign. When the clock hit midnight, the house looked calm from the outside. But Nia couldn't shake the cold feeling that it wasn't empty. She waited until morning before going back inside. Her hands shook as she picked up the recorders and connected them to her laptop. The files were long and quiet at first, just the hum of electricity and the sound of her own footsteps from earlier in the evening. But then, at 2:17 a.m., something changed. The static turned soft, like someone breathing close to the microphone. Then came a faint whisper. It was her mother's voice. Please, help us, she said, her tone weak and full of pain. Nia's chest tightened. A few seconds later, another voice appeared, her father's. He was crying, begging for forgiveness, begging someone not to hurt them. The sound was faint but real. Nia clapped her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She had heard them. They were alive. But before she could process what that meant, the recording continued. A low, scraping noise echoed through the speakers, metallic, heavy. It grew louder, closer, like someone dragging chains across the floor. Nia froze, her whole body trembling. The chains rattled, then stopped. There was a sound of something banging, once, twice, like fists hitting a wall. And then her mother screamed. Not a long scream, but a short, sharp cry of terror that cut off suddenly, replaced by silence. Nia sat there, shaking, staring at the screen. She replayed the moment over and over, each time hoping she'd imagined it. But the voices were real. The sounds were real. Her parents weren't gone, they were trapped somewhere inside that house, alive and suffering. She jumped up and ran to the vent, pressing her ear against it. Mom! Dad, she shouted, her voice breaking. There was no answer, just the hollow echo of her own words bouncing back. She ran to the hidden door, pounding on it until her hands hurt. I know you're there. I'm going to find you. The house stayed silent, but Nia could feel it again, that same unnatural stillness, like the walls were holding a secret too heavy to keep. She wiped her tears, grabbed a hammer, and whispered to herself, I'm not leaving this house until I find them. At that moment, Nia didn't care who or what was behind those walls. She just knew one thing for sure, her parents were alive, and the house itself was their prison. Nia barely slept that night. The sounds from the recording kept playing in her head, her mother crying, her father's weak voice, the rattle of chains. She couldn't take it anymore. If her parents were still alive, she wasn't waiting another minute. She grabbed a hammer, a crowbar, and a flashlight, and began searching the house like a woman possessed. Every inch of the walls, every floorboard, every sound mattered. The house seemed to breathe with her, the air thick and heavy, as if it knew what she was about to uncover. Following the faint noises that still echoed from the vent, she went back to the narrow space behind the wardrobe. The hidden door she'd found before was still slightly open, and cold air spilled out like a warning. Her heart pounded, but she pushed forward. She started hitting the wooden panels, one by one, until her hammer struck something that sounded different, hollow. That was it. She dropped to her knees and began tearing at the wall, splinters flying as she smashed through layers of wood and plaster. Finally, a large hole opened up. Behind it was a dark, narrow corridor. The walls were lined with tangled wires, old security cameras, and thick soundproof padding. It looked like someone had built this place to keep everything, or everyone, silent. The air smelled like metal and rust. Nia's flashlight shook in her hand as she stepped inside. Her breath came out in short gasps, echoing softly against the padded walls. She followed the corridor until it led her to something that made her stop cold, a steel door bolted shut. Her fingers trembled as she tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Using the crowbar, she wedged it under the edge and pushed with all her strength. The metal groaned loudly, echoing through the passage. With one final shove, it flew open. The beam of her flashlight swept across the room, and Nia's heart nearly stopped. Her parents were there. Both of them. Weak, pale, sitting on the cold concrete floor, chained at their wrists and ankles. Her mother lifted her head slowly, eyes wide with disbelief. "Nia," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Mom. Dad." Nia rushed forward, tears pouring down her face. She dropped to her knees, trying to untangle the chains. Her father could barely speak, his lips dry and cracked. He grabbed her hand with shaking fingers and whispered, "He's still here." Nia froze. "Who?" she asked, looking around the dark room. Before her father could answer, a sound echoed behind her, the slow, heavy creak of a floorboard. Her blood ran cold. Someone was in the corridor. She turned off her flashlight, holding her breath. Footsteps moved closer, steady and unhurried, as if whoever it was knew exactly where she was. The metallic chains rattled softly behind her. Nia's pulse thundered in her ears. Whoever built this prison wasn't gone. He was coming back. Nia turned slowly toward the sound of the footsteps. Her flashlight flickered weakly in her trembling hands, the beam catching a shadow moving down the narrow corridor. Then she saw him, a man stepping into view, his face gaunt, his hair wild and streaked with gray. His clothes were torn and filthy, his eyes wide with a strange mix of anger and madness. For a moment, Nia couldn't breathe. She had seen that face before, in old photos on her father's desk. "Baiko," she whispered. He smiled, a twisted grin that didn't reach his eyes. "You remember me," he said in a cracked voice. "Kato's loyal daughter. Always the good one." He stepped closer, dragging something metal along the wall, making a screeching sound that made her flinch. "Your father thought he could ruin me and walk away. He thought he could take everything." Nia's voice shook. "You trapped them. You did this to them." Baiko laughed, a dry, broken sound. "They deserved it. He took my money, my business, my life. So I built this house. My house. A place where he'd finally understand what it feels like to lose everything." He pointed toward her parents, who were still weak and trembling on the floor. "I fed them, I kept them alive. That's more than he ever did for me." "You're insane," Nia said, backing away slowly. Her heart was racing. She could feel the weight of the crowbar she dropped near the door. Biko's eyes darted toward it and then back to her, his grin fading into something darker. "You shouldn't have come back, Nia," he said, his voice low and cold. "I was almost done with them. You ruined everything." He lunged at her, grabbing her by the arm. Nia screamed and fought to break free, kicking and twisting as his grip tightened. Her mother cried out her name, her father tried to move but the chains held him down. In that split second of chaos, Nia's hand brushed against the crowbar. She grabbed it and swung with all her strength. The metal hit Biko's shoulder, sending him stumbling back. He roared in pain, his eyes wild with fury. "You think you can stop me?" he shouted, charging again. Nia swung once more, this time hitting his head. The sound echoed through the corridor. Biko staggered, eyes rolling back, then collapsed to the ground. Nia stood frozen, breathing hard, staring at him. For a moment, all she could hear was her heartbeat, then, in the distance, the faint sound of sirens. Blue and red lights flashed through the cracks of the boarded windows. Someone had called the police. When the officers burst through the door minutes later, they found Nia crying beside her parents, chains still around their wrists. Biko lay motionless on the floor. The nightmare was finally over, or so Nia thought. As the police led her outside, she looked back at the house one last time. The walls were silent now, but she could still feel them watching. Days after the rescue, Nia tried to sleep in her small apartment across town, far from the house that had almost destroyed her. But sleep didn't come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her parents' faces, pale, terrified, chained to the floor. She kept her phone beside her bed, the recording still saved, though she couldn't bring herself to listen to it again. On the third night, she finally drifted off, only to wake suddenly. Her phone screen lit up. The time was 2:17 a.m. Her heart dropped. That exact time again. Then she heard it, faint and distant, but clear. From the phone speaker came the soft, crackling sound of static, and a whisper, "Don't trust the walls." Nia sat up, trembling. She turned off the phone, but the words seemed to echo inside the room, as if the sound wasn't coming from the device anymore, but from the walls around her. She pressed her hands to her ears, whispering to herself that it was over, that she was safe. But deep down, she knew the house had left something behind. A week later, the police tore down the Mbeki home. What they found inside made headlines across the city: more secret rooms, more chains, and boxes filled with old family photos and personal items belonging to people who had gone missing years ago. The newspapers called it the house that breathed. Reporters wanted Nia to talk, but she refused. For her, it wasn't just a story. It was a wound that would never heal. Because sometimes evil doesn't scream or strike fast. Sometimes it hides, patient and quiet, building itself slowly inside our homes, brick by brick, whisper by whisper.